Okay, this one we don't have on for a vote.
What's that?
Some things that are
Possible, oh, okay, where am I? Here it is, markup and possible vote. Okay, so this is the elected pass-through, this is the salt worker. I wish we could call it what it was. Because I'm saying, what is that? I said, oh, that's what that is. Okay. So committee, we've walked through this a couple times. Abby, Ted. Yeah, start off. We'll see where we get. I think this is one we're either gonna do or not do.
taken up or down.
Yeah.
Vote, yeah. Learning about with the necessity.
But I was, Abby can do that, and then Ted, I think we need to know, we've been told it's a plus for the state, I've been told, find out how much. But yeah, this is basically, we're gonna allow people that own essentially an LLC, anything other than a corporation, a pass-through business, to work around, if they choose, paying their salt tax. Yeah, if they don't get their salt tax, the state and local tax deduction, or the, working around the limit on the federal tax form. It would not impact people that don't own such businesses that are working on wages or salaries. So that I know has been floated by me as an equity issue, but that's a choice we'll make. We can help some. Do we not help them because we can't help everybody? So.
Or would it attract people also? You know, as an economic development tool in terms of increasing people who might want to live in Vermont, who might not want to absent that.
Of course. Yeah, because we have high state and local taxes. Yes, because we can attract them because they can't find a house.
And we took care of that housing bill this morning.
And it's all gonna pop up like mushrooms overnight. Okay. Let's go. We digress.
For the record, Abby Shepherd, Office of Legislative Counsel. There are two documents for S45 that are under my name on the committee webpage. The first is the bill as introduced, so that is what you are all discussing. There is a draft report from the committee based on your discussions over the last couple of weeks about this bill. The only change that makes, and I will just swap screens here. It's not too glitchy. There we are. So this is the potential, just a draft, just to show language for how you have been discussing the potential of the federal suspension not being sort of repealed. So currently it's in effect through the end of tax year 25, so calendar year 25, meaning the $10,000 cap will no longer be in place if nothing changes at the federal level starting in 2026. What this language does is it creates a repeal of the Vermont deduction cap workaround. And the way it works is it would make the workaround effective at the beginning of this year, so it's retroactive. So individuals who are part of pass-throughs will be able to use the full deduction for at least 2 years. And then starting on line 16, you'll see there's this contingent effective date. So it has so it's the later of either December 31st, 2025, which is the current date that the suspension or the cap would be repealed, or if there's any sort of federal change that extends that cap, it would be on the date where the cap is fully repealed. So it's either December 31st, 2025, or the date on which the federal limitation is added.
If you decided if you're actually getting only 90, we're still at 90% of the deduction you get if the cap went away, then you'd have to be a little crazy, but maybe some people wouldn't be paying that much attention. And basically cleans up the law. We haven't got things hanging out there that are no longer relevant.
That's what the commissioner said, is that it, like, it can be repealed so that if it does go away at the federal level, to just make the tax forms less confusing, which they have a reputation for being very confusing, so.
I read through the form for the homestead. I want to work on that, but I'm still waiting for the tax department to. I asked for some suggestions, like how could, with having, I mean, it's the true up between last year's income and this, the cost of doing that just in social capital was worse than the physical capital that we might lose. And there may be some other things on there that just aren't worth, we may lose a little revenue if somebody is out there cheating. You really do have a grandma with a couple $1 million living in your auxiliary dwelling unit. And she's paying all the bills, but I think that's, you get into people that take in a homeless person or somebody fleeing domestic violence or a sick relative, and it gets pretty bad. So we'll look at that. Okay. So we have the amendment. All right. Any questions about the amendment? All right. So Ted, Emily, I bet Ted, are you there in this school now?
This is
We
the
don't have
amendment
a
to the bill.
test order at this point.
Okay.
We have a general answer. We'll see your amendment on that. We haven't done it.
Okay. And you just, I think what we care about is we aren't gonna lose money.
No.
And we might actually gain money.
Because we're only giving, the way this is set up, you only deduct like 90%, you get back 90%, or you keep 90% of what you would have paid, and the state gets a remaining 10%.
Oh, okay. Well, wow.
So we will make, it was
Like
not
negligible,
very
but-
much.
I mean,
money.
hey.
You might build one house, a very small one.
$5
So it wasn't. Okay, committee. What is your pleasure with this bill? To call to question. Well, if any, the first would be moving to amend as,
Where's our clerk?
where's our clerk?
Clerk?
Yeah, if you want to, let me, well,
Can you give Sergeant Chittenden the clerk paper?
stand in clerks.
Just standing, yeah, our clerk is missing.
Do we vote on the amendment or just the bill?
I don't know.
You vote on the amendment, then the bill.
Yeah, then the bill. I don't know that do you keep record of the amendment? But I've never been a clerk.
It's kind of chair's prerogative, I think, unless it's a huge.
I don't do voice votes on everything either. And I've been told we don't need a second in committee.
That's good to remember.
Our clerk is back.
I tried to give your job away.
Yes, your clerk, we're waiting for you to vote. Filling in.
Your favorite bill.
Okay.
We have a motion.
We do not yet. This is S45, elective pass-through entity tax,
Yeah.
entity income tax and credit. This is the SALT workaround.
So someone dropped out of that salt agreement. Just the other day.
Yes, they did. It's a problem with using that.
Salt, bill.
Yeah.
Natural resources.
Yes. Okay, so first I need a motion to amend as, I gotta find a number from Abby.
S45, it's draft 1.1.
Okay, this is the amendment to S45 is presented from Abby Shepherd. Adds section 4 is draft 1.1. And that adds the,
I move that, what the chair says.
this puts the ending, when the federal goes away, this goes away, which is supposed to be 2025, so it puts a sunset on it. Okay, is there further discussion about the amendment which would sunset this bill when the federal law that is set to go away in 2025 goes away? Or if they extend it or do it, it's basically when they change the rules, this workaround will go away.
We stay piggyback.
Yes. Okay, further discussion? If not, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. I'm reading that 700. Now we need a motion to,
Report the bill favorably to so.
Senator Bray has moved that we report S45 favorably as amended. Further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. That's 701, and Senator Chittenden did at
700.
700, yes. I know you're on the bill, so would you report it? Is somebody else on here that might like to report it?
Happy to, also happy to yield.
It's all yours. Okay,
So,
good, we've got.
And you can tell Michael.
Bills out of here. One was an extension of things we've already done twice, all right. So now we're on to 93, which is a sales tax exemption for advanced wood boilers. And Abby is doing this also. Senator Chittenden, this is yours, but I know that Senator Perchlik, who is the expert, are you texting
I'm
him?
texting him now.
I knew he said he would try and come over, so unless they're doing something crucial in the probes, I'm assuming he will come over. And you need to get the original bill from Jill. They'll give you, but a sticky note with the vote, no, you don't need that, just the bill, the amendment. We need to get print an amendment. Can we get a clean? Can you print out that amendment, clean copy? And then take it up with your name and the vote.
I'll wait for that.
Yeah, as soon as Jill gets it. And they'll be down shortly to see if you have it. Okay, so Abby, talk us through what is, Senator Perchlik.
Would you like to go?
I was thinking maybe Senator Perchlik, since he is our advanced wood heat expert. To me, wood is wood, so what is advanced wood?
Rabbit food.
Okay, well,
So Andrew Purchase, the Senator from Washington County for the record. Do you want me to answer that question first or talk about the bill?
just talk about, just tell us what is advanced wood, really short, and then.
It's defined in the statute. I think it says 75% efficient is how it's defined. I'd have to ask the
We're talking about boilers, right?
These are mainly pellet boilers. This is what we're talking about here. I think it just says advanced wood heat. It doesn't mention boilers.
It says advanced wood boiler. Is the advanced part wood or boilers?
The advanced part is the efficiency level
Of
of
the
the
boiler.
boiler.
Okay, I just needed to make sure. I thought it was.
But if it just says boilers, then so it doesn't include all the stoves.
This is about shoulders.
is the things they're putting in your schools and fire departments.
Homes.
Yes, it's only for the.
Yes.
We don't exempt non-advanced boilers.
Right, so there's like old cordwood boilers would not be, they
Okay.
usually can't meet the sufficiency level.
They're the ones you put outside your house.
Or the outdoor wood
Yeah.
boilers would not meet the sufficiency level, usually, so they wouldn't qualify. So this was, we have these advanced wood boilers. There are some that are made in the United States, but unfortunately, almost all of them are going to be imported from Europe, mostly from Austria. Austria seems to have a corner on the boiler market, but heating fuels in Austria are equivalent of $10 a gallon. So they have a lot of incentive to switch to non-fossil fuel heating. But we have one pellet mill in the state in Clarendon. We used to have another one in Windsor that shut down. There's been talks of opening one, so the state has been trying to work with folks to open more.
Yeah, what has been we went through that when we were working with Rygate, which we
Yeah.
may be again.
They're not in advance.
I know they aren't in advance, but talking about putting a pellet
Using the heat for
manufacturer
pellets, yeah.
using their heat. And it seems in a state with a whole lot of wood,
Part of it is permitting, air permitting is restricting it a little bit of how large they can be.
Is that our air permitting or federal? It's
Yeah.
ours.
So I assume, well, it's ours, but I don't know if what we're following is a federal permit, but it's usually around the DOCs.
Okay.
It's a limiting factor. But there's been several projects that were proposed. There's one that's going to be built, I think, at Wells River next to the P&H truck stop there. I don't know if that project's going to go forward or not. I think they're trying to get the funding for it.
We used to take field trips from the adult daycare to the truck stop.
Yeah, it's quite the tourist stop.
It is quite a place.
Good place to get
There was a
fun.
bus full of Japanese tourists there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is, so several years ago, I can't remember when, maybe Ledge Council remember the original,
2018.
2018, and then that, I think, was only for a few years, and then we did extend it once, so this would extend the sales tax exemption. The second time, I think we ended up for another 2 years till 2025.
Okay, so this would be an extension of an existing exemption. Okay, so I'm assuming then we wouldn't be losing revenue we presently have. We would be foregoing revenue. This is a tax expenditure.
And another part of this that the council reminded me about when they're drafting the bill, the original bill had a revenue replacement because of the tax expenditure. The money came from the Clean Energy Development Fund. So the Clean Energy Development Fund would say, this is the many advanced wood boilers that were installed, 6% of that would have been X, and the Clean Energy Development Fund sent that money over to the tax department. And they did that quarterly, I think, for the time of the first few years of the bill.
Okay.
There was an issue that Ledge Council brought up about whether that reporting is required. When we extended the tax credit, you didn't sunset that part about the transfer and the reporting. But it was the understanding from the tax department and the Department of Public Service that it ended the transfer and the reporting.
So you haven't been.
After that first 3 years or whatever it was, that stopped. Was the Clean Energy Development Fund ran out of money.
Yeah, the Clean Energy Development Fund was pretty much at zero at one point.
Yeah, it's getting pretty close to that.
Yeah.
And I think there was a time when the legislature gave money specifically for wood, it was for a wood stove change out, but
Was that Yankee? That there was the Yankee money
Yeah.
that got drawn from.
Yeah, that's when we started. It was with Yankee money.
So do we know how many of these efficient wood boilers sold during the?
yeah, I could get you that. I want to say it's around 40 a year now is about what we're at. We're just like, could be some that go in that don't get the incentive. There is an incentive that the state has right now. And with ARPA money, that increased it for low income people because these are not cheap systems. These systems cost 20, 30 grand. These are centralized systems. It depends on how much you're including other part of the plumbing, because often when you replace your boiler, you're going to replace your whole control board and all your circulators, and you might even do some other work. So that's often included in the
And
installation.
this is hot water, not hot air.
It could be either one. It could be a boiler or a furnace. It says boiler, but it's been interpreted to be boiler and or furnace.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a issue on the draft.
Is it eligible for anything in the Inflation
Wait,
Reduction
did
Act?
he go up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, all wood burners basically are eligible now for the tax credit, but with a cap of $2,000.
Okay.
So unlike the other renewable energy technologies that have 30% without a cap, wood has this cap of $2,000, so which is okay for the stove, because those are going to be $4,000, $6,000, you know, for good ones. But for a pellet boiler where it's $30,000 or $22,000, 30%.
Yeah.
You definitely have that $2,000.
$2,000 is my sales tax.
But these are for individual homeowners, or how many, who does this serve?
This would serve the tax credit as anybody that buys them. So
Right.
a lot of individual homeowners are putting them in, but there are like small schools putting them in, small, businesses putting them. When you get a big school, then they'll usually do chips. But we're seeing more and more people decide to use pellets instead of chips because of more availability and just understanding. And
Marytown School has chips, I believe. The East Montpelier Fire
that
Department,
was pellets.
that's pellets.
You are good.
I've
Yeah.
seen
Everything
them.
going on in your towns.
There's chips, Williams has chips.
The whole, the State House is heated with chips, the whole state complex is heated with chips, National
City
Life.
of Montpelier.
City parts of downtown Montpelier chips, the National Life Building, all chips.
So this doesn't
They
touch
can.
chips,
It's not to touch chips.
because
I mean-
chips are not as good.
It would, I guess it's advanced wood boiler. So if you have a chip boiler, if that meets the
Those can
efficiency
be
level.
advanced, but
But
okay.
usually they don't.
Oh, okay.
This is, the technology just gets new.
I see.
The reason you can get a higher efficiency with the pellets is because you dry the wood so
Mhm.
much. And so a lot of the chip boilers is green chips. So you're spending a lot of the heat just to dry the chips and evaporate water, so they're not as efficient.
You put the logs in the fireplace and they sizzle.
Right.
Right.
Wet wood.
You're boiling off that water.
You're boiling off the water.
Don't cut up your chimney.
Yes, you are.
In the effort to have cleaner energy, there is a debate going on right now about
Yeah.
biofuels.
Yeah.
Some people advocate for totally carbon-free heating.
Yeah.
And would oppose this because it, first of all, involves wood from the forest, which means the depletion of the carbon sink.
Yeah.
And it also means that there's going to be some carbon.
Yeah.
There are others, people with pretty incredible green credentials, who will say it's a necessary evil, but we still have to rely on some biofuel.
Yeah.
And what you want are the cleaner, if there are no clean.
Let me see that.
This sounds like a skit. He's dusting in the camera.
It's like a Parks and Rec episode or something.
There are people who will argue, and people with pretty good green credentials that will say that it's necessary evil, we have to tolerate some carbon. Cleaner biofuel. Where does this fit in the sort of the spectrum of
Well,
the dirtiest biofuel probably is to burn green logs. Or to burn
green
wet
logs and like
okay.
an open campfire would be the,
Yeah.
or like a fireplace, where you're just
Yeah,
open, then you get the most particulates and the least efficient, the least amount of heat off of that. But these are at the high end because they're just that much more efficient. So you're getting more heat, so you have to burn less wood.
is there technology for burning the smoke?
Yeah, I mean, they have both the wood stoves where you're having a kind of open burn in the burn chamber that's how they are getting the efficiency and the emissions down, where they basically are having a secondary burn out of the smoke. There are stoves that have catalytic converters where they just try to pull that out, but now that folks have done more engineering to just design better stoves, Vermont only has one stove manufacturer left. We used to have like 28 or something like that. There's only one left in Morrisville, Hearthstone. So you can go to, they have a whole laboratory. Now they're hiring people that are just about how do we design the burn? How do we design the inside of this chamber so that more of the smoke can get, more of the particulates. The particulates, the smoke, are pieces of wood. So that is flammable. You just have to have it hot. You have to design it better so that it burns out.
Yeah, little tiny pieces of wood.
That's what it is, yeah. You can see it, it's basically wood, unburned.
Just out of curiosity, what happened to the other 27 or so stove manufacturers?
Just over, yeah, this, I think that figure is from, maybe even 100 years ago. I think just slowly went out of business as the stoves became less common. It used to be where everybody had one in every room.
Well, I was thinking though, with wood pellets, and as people move to things like heat pumps that won't heat the whole house, and there needs to be alternative energy sources to provide heat. So people move to, I would have thought that would be the market for advanced wood stoves would be increasing.
It is increasing. Like I think sales are up even since pandemic, just because more people are home and like, oh, I'm gonna get this old stove going that I was never home to use before. So what I've heard from the stove shops is they are selling more stoves, and stoves or even pellet boilers I think are a good mix with heat pumps, because sometimes if you come in from the cold and you want to like shake off your snowy wet boots, it's nice to kind of come up to an appliance that's cranking out the BTUs. I mean, if you build a house, you don't need this. If you can build a really tight house, you can do it with heat pumps and the temperature will be fine. But a lot of Vermonters like that feel of the wood stove, and you can do that with in a responsible way.
That's Senator Gray, let's.
We worked on emissions with ANR.
Yeah.
Wood stoves, and I thought there was a breakout for how many BTUs before you changed category. Does this cover all the categories?
This just is pretty straightforward that it's just anyone that would pay the sales tax. So often sometimes the bigger ones, because there's that exemption if you're using it for manufacturing, you don't have to pay the sales tax. So if they're using it for something, some kind of manufacturer, but if they had to pay the sales tax and they can meet the efficiency, then they would not have to pay the sales tax.
Right. And in terms of what it fits in with the Affordable Heat Act names advanced wood heat as a clean heat measure. So it's supportive of those sorts of stoves. Being selected makes it more competitive when you're pricing it out.
Well, the other thing, there was a huge growth in wood stoves about the time we moved to Vermont, which was the oil embargo, in which we tried to keep one car with gas in it in the neighborhood, lest there be an emergency in the middle of the night. But you could not get gas, you could not get oil. The oil and gas-fired electric generators, everything, we had double-digit inflation, probably the last time we did. And so people were looking for a more controlled, that's when we put in all the small hydros, which then got to be our most expensive electricity. But they got was it a 20 or 30 year contract? But it went up, and then the farmers caught on and the price of wood went up and the price of oil went down, and people got tired of, having to come home from work and haul wood and start the fire, and by the time it got blazing, you were going to bed and didn't need to eat. So, I mean, there's an economic cycle that goes with this. You know, we left electricity because it got expensive. And part of what this committee's been trying to do is strike that balance to keep electric and alternative fuels in the competitive, affordable range. And that's important.
Have you contemplated a permanent sales tax exemption?
Yes. I mean, it's something for the committee to consider that all the other renewable energy devices, technologies have a permanent sales tax exemption. This is the only one that is.
Oh, okay.
So solar hot water, wind, all those are exempt from the sales tax. So that was the original idea, to just level the playing field for this, which we were starting and trying to increase. And it was new and the cost was high, so that this would kind of make it fair. I think at the time that this committee said, well, we'll do it as a with the sunset, and also the money coming from the Clean Energy Fund because it had money in that.
Okay.
But then extended it.
So how about coal-fired heat pumps? Are they tax exempt?
Who? Cold climate heat pumps? No, because they're not a renewable technology. Because there's a statute that says renewable technologies. If I remember correctly, the sales tax exemption talks about the renewable or the solar, and then it has a definition of, I can't remember how it
We might
is.
want to look at that, just, yeah. if you
Heat pumps
get a
are not.
chance, yeah. And maybe if during fiscal at some point can give us just a cost estimate. Well, we aren't collecting it now, right? So it would be, we wouldn't lose revenue that we
Because of lost
presently
opportunity
have,
of
but
tax expenditure.
yeah. Yeah, maybe just.
For things in the IRA that are subsidized right now, it's a nice complement
What would
that the
happen?
state could provide.
I mean,
All the board.
there's like
all-
a confluence.
Yeah, all of
Right.
these, I think heat pumps
Makes the whole thing more.
what we're about.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big tax.
Big push, it would be hard to know
yeah,
30,000.
how much.
I mean, it's like, that could be the same,
Say, well, that's what they're trying to do. It
that
could
could be the same with solar, like solar can easily.
Which might be revenue.
Right.
Instead of
Looking at my invoice for the heat pump I bought last year, it doesn't break down in sales tax.
Okay.
Sales tax instead.
I think I paid so.
That's right, sales tax. Oh,
That'd
sales tax is everyone.
They might, but I mean, they're gonna give you one package.
You're right. Okay. We're gonna play with it.
Senator McDonald, give you a note. The soapstone, there's like Woodstock's soapstone company, they're actually based in New Hampshire. And Vermont Castings still does castings of wood stove, fireboxes. They do the metal castings, but then they ship them to Pennsylvania. And that's where the stoves are assembled, because there's been a big consolidation in the stove market. So even the soapstone, the Hearthstone in Mooresville is owned by a multinational company that is Spain, Vermont Castings.
Spain seems to have a lot of fingers in this. They're concerned because Spain was doing some of the windmill turbines and one of the
There's some big
companies.
Spanish wind turbine companies too. But I get, for some reason, at least one of the big ones is Spanish company that does.
Just, well, we used everything coming from China, but Spain is just,
Well, Europe is really big on
Yeah.
wood heating.
oh yeah. I remember driving through Italy and every little shop had solar panels.
So are you being for checking out whether or not we tax coal-fired heat pumps and considering not taxing them?
I was just talking to joint fiscal. This impacts the ed fund, the property taxes. B, we could estimate the cost per unit. But if you're successful in getting everybody to convert to them, the cost is going to go way up. So we could know what it would be this year, maybe. But if you multiply that, 20% next year, you're going to get a very big, a bigger hit. So I don't think it's quite as, it's hitting our money, not Jane's.
Well, I mean, to the point about renewability, right now, the grid is about 64, 65% renewable. And 3 utilities are 100% renewable. So to the extent that you use renewable energy to run a heat pump, you know, it's consistent with the notion of renewability being given preferential treatment in order to encourage that, those choices when you are considering fuel
You're
choices.
saying that the grid is what, renewable?
The grid is about 65%.
I mean, as I look at ISO to go constantly,
That's the mix for
fuel mix.
ISO New England. But most of, that's not the portfolio of Vermont electric utilities. They have, because of their,
They're not using the New England grid in order as a source.
well, they have long-term contracts, many of them have, you know, long-term contracts. And so their power supply, most of their power supply is secured by long-term contracts that are made by price spikes. And they're probably buying just on the margin grid mix power. And even there, they may be making, they're making choices. I can get you the VIPSA report. Remember,
Yeah,
they were in and they were showing us their portfolio,
yeah, I'd be curious
right? And
as to how much, how much is renewable, how much really is coming from nuclear, which is, is the standby for.
That we heard, yeah.
23%, I think,
Yeah,
for the
29,
state.
right now.
Yeah.
So,
29%
Well-
right now, as of the moment.
right, but that is, so that's always reporting out, the grid as a whole.
Yeah.
What, as opposed to what Vermont utilities have.
Right, but we had the utilities in last week, and I think it was electric co-op that 19% of theirs was
Yeah, I heard that.
nuclear. And there was one other up in the kingdom that had a significant nuclear content.
Well, it's interesting, it would be a grid of what the capacity is for each of these fuels. The capacity overall for doing the grid for renewables is pretty low.
So we're gonna have tomorrow,
As a portion-
we're going to have utilities 101.
People contract.
Just because I'm quite sure there's a bill floating around out there. But it is extremely complex. I'm actually asked them to talk about tier 1, 2, and 3 in the portfolios. But just a general overview of what that regulatory package is for utilities and renewables and standard offer and the mix that you have to have in your portfolio. And that's a question that I have, which is how much capacity do we have? And as we transition to more electric, how much more capacity are we going to have to build?
I
Like,
mean, poles and wires.
no, I mean solar panels.
Or
I
you-
think, yeah. I mean, poles and wires, we don't usually get a lot of neighbors complaining about.
No,
Cell towers, we do. But we will need, if we're gonna go to solar, we're gonna need to build more solar panels in more fields, and we're going to need more battery storage for months like this when the sun really shines, which has been since October, I think. And they're doing a lot of that, but if we're successful, because it sounds good until somebody's putting the solar panels in your backyard, and then it might not sound that good.
We did do a bill on energy siting 5 years ago.
Yes, and I think that's what we're gonna be asked to undo. Isn't that the one where you only allow it on rooftops and in reclaimed landfills?
Well, you get a preferred rate if you go on preferred sites.
Yeah.
That includes landfills, rooftops.
Yeah, but my question is, how many of those,
How much of that is around?
yeah, how much of that is around? And at what point are we gonna have to spill over into fields and at Yeah, and then there's the whole affordability issue, which we have to look at.
The House has started it though.
I know there's one out there, that's why I want us.
I think it just got introduced, it's like H269.
So that makes it here, and we'll at least have a background in the language of energy regulation or utility regulation, which is a language unto itself. We've tried to make the process more user-friendly because procedures before the Public Utility Commission, when it was the Public Service Board, usually involved a couple of utility lawyers, all of whom spoke utility language, and it was all very formalized. It was court. When we started putting it in cell towers and solar fields, the average member of the public got more involved because it was their yard. And the system was not set up to help them. So we've done several things to make it more intelligible for, and more user-friendly. I don't know. Yeah, I haven't heard the complaints. I did, so I assume it's working okay.
I don't know how this usually works, but I would love to see a JFO analysis of what it would cost to have cold weather heat pumps also be sales tax exempt. And in that case, I definitely support a sunset too, because I think there's a marketing benefit. We can keep extending the sunset, but if that's looming, it could motivate people to place their orders before the sunset goes away.
Right, and then the other thing is you can just, as this bill goes for the most efficient, it might be for the high efficiency version.
We spoke earlier, I said 75%, it's 85% is how we define advanced wood heating. It also is defined in there that it had a certain amount of storage. Certain amount of storage of pellets, I think it says 1 week worth of
Yeah, you can't,
storage, because that's part of the cost, is you also have to have this large bin
yes.
to hold the pellets.
And you can't get a mortgage unless you have a thermostat controlled heating system, because if you go away and your pellet stove runs out of wood and you get a cold freeze, your pipes freeze, so.
And these are fully automatic, like.
Yeah.
I have my home in Marshfield with one of these, and it's, the pellets come on a truck, they get pneumatically blown into the bin, they get pneumatically blown into the boiler, and the boiler augers them into the burn pit. I never touch the pellets, just as like I never touched oil when I used to use that.
And I haven't seen one of those.
Where does the wood come from in the first place? Is this, are the trees cut down for the purpose of making them into pellets? Or are the pellets made from scrap of trees that were cut down for lumber?
Both. There some would be like thinning. Nobody's like managing their forest just to cut to sell to chip mills, because you just can't make any money doing that. So you're gonna manage your lot for veneer or lumber, because that's where you're gonna get the most money. But sometimes you're gonna take out a whole tree to make room for that maple to grow. So you'll take out this white pine that maybe this is big, could even be a decent sized tree, but you want to take it down, let the maple grow, and you could chip that into. They basically grinded it into sawdust and then run it through a pellet mill to make the pellets. They can also just use sawdust. So there's a mixture of what they use in the mills, from whole trees to tops to branches to sawdust itself.
What
And
do
some
they
mills,
glue them together with?
it's not, there's no adhesive in there. It's the force of the mill forcing that sawdust through a tiny hole causes it to heat up, and so they're kind of like, that's why the outside of a pellet is kind of glossy, and that it's just kind of packed together, and the heat causes it to bind. They can break apart, and so some low quality pellets have a lot of fines, and they can break apart easily, and those little broken parts can cause trouble in some boilers. So yeah, they can clog up the auger, they can sometimes just cause other problems. So
Because I've been told one of the problems was that pellets needed hardwood.
Or so?
it's a debate about which is better. Some people say softwood pellets are better. So the plant in Clarendon only takes softwood, so they can sell their pellets as 100% softwood pellets.
Okay.
They basically only take white pine. But others sell others. And there's a pellet mill in upstate New Hampshire that's all sawdust because they're around a couple big sawmills. So they're basically, I've been told, or maybe almost exclusively sawdust. And there's it's a spoke mill or something like that up in northern Vermont. I want to say like Richford, that is talking about making a small pellet mill just from their waste wood because they have a lot of the sawdust. Otherwise, they would sell it to farmers, but there's less farmers taking sawdust as there once was.
Well, it's hard if you have a farm to get sawdust these days. Like the mills around where I am, that burn sawdust to run their own kilns, stuff like that. They're powering themselves,
Yeah.
waste.
So I would just say I could see how this could get lost in a much bigger conversation. And I think that, I wouldn't want to see that happen. I think if it could pass, I would support it. But I think if we're going to look at the bigger conversation, I just want to look at anything that's eligible for a rebate or a subsidy from the Inflation Reduction Act in totality is what we might look at tax exemptions for, because it's just such a critical time to help people take advantage of what the federal government is doing in a time-bound way. So,
Yeah, it would be helpful to have a list
yeah.
of all the options that are out there that you could help people understand. I mean, we've been told you got a couple that are just starting the experiment with run it on your bill and pay it off monthly, but that's gonna have to run for a while to figure out. And then, the exemptions and wood is renewable, but it burns a lot faster than it grows. So how do we manage that crop?
Yeah, in the renewable energy standard, there's a definition of renewable. And the PUC asked, I think the legislature asked Forest Parks to come up with the definition for what is renewable wood. And they presented that to the PUC, which accepted it as part of the tier 3, since utilities can provide it.
Tier 3 till tomorrow, we'll learn what that is.
So they did define what kind of sustainable harvesting is that makes the wood renewable. So they did work on it, but it's mainly based on the efficiency of the appliance that's burned, and it's kind of how they got it into.
Yeah.
Actually, constantly utilities supporting it with wood.
Well, it's tier 3, so
Even tier 3.
yeah, there are. I think WEC had $1,000 incentive for a while for tier 3. I don't think Green Mountain Power ever did. I think BEC had one for wood pellet stoves, things like that, $200. I think if there's still a couple out there.
WEC's rate, maybe it makes more sense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for considering it. and-
Okay. So Abby, did we ever get to you? We did.
No.
Walk us through that, then I'm gonna, maybe we've got some time, so I've asked Jill to print out the list of bills in committee, and we can have a discussion and start prioritizing what we're gonna do with them. See where we go, try to.
For the record, Abby Shepherd, also legislative council. I think we really covered everything that's going on.
Abby, you need,
I'm sorry, I just like a quick question. I know you guys just voted the bill out. The version 1.1, was that the final version or does it need to go through? Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. We didn't mess with anything.
Thank you. That's all I need. I just wanted to make sure that.
With the
So you're good, you're good.
The amendment draft 1.1, I made sure that was ready for today.
Used to be you just walked around with it for a couple of days and eventually dropped it off. We've gotten very formal. Sometimes you forgot to drop it off.
Joe, if we're on YouTube.
Lobby upstairs.
Yes, that's it, where there were pocket windows.
How long it could take to go up one flight of stairs.
Governor Shumlin once pocketed a bill and voted out of committee.
Yeah,
Just never brought it,
What?
never brought it anywhere.
Never brought?
no, I mean, we have improved that we are live.
You would.
But now it is a very formal process and has multiple hands and fingers on it to make sure things get upstairs in the form that they left this room.
He got more formal part, so we wouldn't know.
That made them get
We
really,
had to
yeah.
have a stepwise way to make sure.
if you couldn't walk it upstairs in person, you had to be some way to verify that, yes, those 7 people living 200 miles apart just made the decision to do this. Okay, Abby, we're gonna get to you and see, do just the formal walkthrough of this bill. I don't think it's particularly good.
It is, and I did have a few dates and just sort of background information to give you, but really grateful that the senator was here because I'm absolutely not an expert in wood boilers or furnaces. The definition doesn't do both. Just wanted to point that out. So they have been exempt since 2018. And that initial, so it's all in session law except for the definition of advanced wood boiler that was enacted in the statute as well as the statutory purpose. Those are both put into statute and the exemption. However, within session law, there is the sunset, so that has been extended once. Initially, it was an exemption from 2018, July 1st, 2018 through July 1st, 2021. That was extended once to this July 1st, 2023. And then this bill before US 93 would extend it another 2 years to 2025. As Senator Perchlik mentioned, there were 2 requirements from the Clean Energy Development Fund. One was to report quarterly to the tax department on how much the expenditure was costing the state. And the second requirement was to actually transfer up to $200,000 over 2 fiscal years, the expenditure amount. That originally was going from the Clean Energy Development Fund to the general fund, but then you decided to shift all sales tax revenues to the ed fund, so they changed it to be a payment to the ed fund. That is no longer, that transfer between funds is no longer in effect. What I mentioned to Senator Perchlik, as he mentioned, was that the report requirement is not, it's not really clear under the language whether that was ever sunset. So if you wanted to do cleanup in session law, you could say that is, they no longer have to report, but my understanding is the report's not happening anyway. I did check the tax expenditure report that was just released, that's every 2 years, and it doesn't seem to have a clear expenditure amount in there. So I would defer to JFO to determine how much this is actually costing currently. And the other point I wanted to make was that the language, it's very, I can share my screen or if you have it in front of you, the language is very minimal. It's minimal. It's just adding a repeal of the statutory purpose. So it's both a repeal of the exemption and the statutory purpose, and then the change to the effective date for the sunset. It's a very short bill.
Just a question regarding the actual cost of the tax expenditure. For all tax expenditures, aren't we supposed to be tracking them? So when the tax expenditure report is produced.
Sorry.
It may just be, so I do not participate really in that report. It may just be in another, I just looked at it quickly sitting on the sideline. So I can circle back with JFO to see if it's.
I just think it's important that on any tax expenditure that we vote for, that we know on an ongoing basis what it's costing.
The question is, we'll have JFO.
Yes.
They do it. Why is it fuzzy? And it may be that we don't, there's so few of these that we don't have a clear reporting chain who reports to whom. Well, just, yeah, no, but they said JFO said the cost of this was not clear, I guess.
Sorry, so I should clarify, I just looked very quickly in the tax expenditure report and did not see a line item for this. That doesn't mean that it's not included in that report and you should hear from JFO. I can't find that information.
Right, well, I think you should, and the point that I'm making is, if there is no mechanism in statute to track any tax expenditure we deal with, it seems as though we ought to put it in statute.
Well, I think they had the clean energy development had to report to the tax department how much they gave out. But that
Sunset, that report.
sunset, it doesn't sound like, so there may not be any reporting, and we may want, especially if we may see an increase in this kind of heat, because we're supposedly going to offer some incentives to people to do it. So,
For our own housekeeping, don't we have a tax expenditure report, right? Where
yes,
we review it periodically and it has to state the purpose.
yes.
And all of
So
that
I would
is,
think this would this automatically get rolled into that rule report or?
generally, yes, so that's why I would defer to JFO to see if
Yeah,
they
we'll
have the
have,
data
we'll
somewhere
have
else.
JFO down to tell us where it is.
What we're here is that we've had this as a tax expenditure for some time, and the question is, has it been reported?
Well, we know they were reporting to the tax department for the first 3 years.
So the transfer between funds was for 2 years. It was fiscal 19 and fiscal year 20. And the report, it's not that's the part that I
No
had highlighted.
expenditure that
It
year.
was not clear whether that was ongoing or not. But the actual transfer has ceased, so that was
So
clear.
19 through 20, the Clean Energy Fund, and we must have renewed it, we did renew it, because it was pretty close to empty. When Vermont Yankee dried up, which was the source of the funding, it was this administration, one of the first years where we stayed here a long time working on the budget. They had spent down almost everything in that fund. And at some point, we put some money back into it. But there was a dedicated revenue source until Vermont Yankee went away. We were paying the sales tax to the tax department out of the Clean Energy Fund. But that was for 3 years. It's not clear what happened when both the reporting and they haven't been transferring the money.
Correct. There's no longer a transfer.
And no one's gone after them for the money, and I doubt that they have the money. So, if we're putting the money in and then taking the money out, we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. When it was Vermont Yankees money, it was fine that we took it out. But it will have joint fiscal come in and go through the history as they know it and any of the numbers, so we know what we're extending.
We might have this feeling, I may not be right, that we put 10 million of ARPA.
I know okay, that may be, I know we have replenished the fund.
And then it does have some income because it is a revolving loan fund. So
That's right.
it gets money back, but not a lot.
No, and you can't take a whole lot out. You just shrink your ability to loan. You taking out a lot. Okay, any other questions for Abby? All right. I'm going to walk us through just a couple minutes of bills and see. I've got my literal back of the envelope that I did, but we actually have. Ooh, okay. I don't know, is that a toner or we? Wow, okay. Okay, that's 35 is the town of Hartford. Senator White did talk to me, and she is going to impress on the town of Hartford that if they want this, they should be here. We're running out of time. We got two bills today. One is the town of Barry's tax extension. Right, we got that today. So I'll put that on early. We're either, this is their first, so we'll listen to them. We're either gonna do it or not do it.
Their first extension.
Yeah.
And in fairness to the town of Hartford, I spoke with their planner, Lori Hirschfeld, and she pointed out that they've kind of got caught off guard by the auditor's comments and had asked for a week to.
We gave them, but we don't have much time left.
What I'm saying about the fact that they did not come in yesterday
Right.
was that they thought that had already been straightened out, that they were not expecting.
No.
Well, I know that's not the case, but they thought it was. They
Okay.
thought they had done their due diligence and
Okay.
made other
So
arrangements.
they just have been a communications mess up, but we will try and get both of them in and make a decision up or
Yeah.
down. I've told Senator White that what we really need are the answers to the 800,000 in the bank. Why did they need more? And why did they need an extension of the loan ability? This will be their second extension. If they're rehabbing another storefront to be commercial space, that's one thing. If they're putting up 100 units of housing, given the housing crisis, that might be more compelling. So we'll listen to it.
Well, Senator White is a former C-left. She was on the select board. And she lives in White River Junction.
Yeah.
So she is intimately familiar
Yes,
with
she
the
is
issue.
following, she
And on
got,
the other hand, I'm on the committee, so I
okay,
will, I think it's very
just
important,
coordinate with her.
Yeah. but we gotta work on making sure.
Yes, making sure they're prepared when they come in.
Did I dream this? But Hartford came in once.
Yes.
They did come in and say, we just got caught up in the pandemic and the
And-
supply chain.
What didn't come up then and
Uh-huh.
came up after they left is that they've already had one extension.
Okay.
And extensions, somebody said, maybe it was when I wasn't here, but to my memory, the only one we've done has been Windsor.
Oh, I thought Burlington
No,
got it too.
Burlington's a different,
Oh,
Burlington
okay.
is a completely different animal. We don't deal with that. No, Burlington, Winooski, and Milton
Oh,
all had, I think that's the list, all got TIFs during maybe the 80s, early 90s. And they all have set regulations, they all have,
I thought we still had to approve their extensions.
we have to approve them, yes.
Okay. I
But
thought
they
Burlington got
work
two.
on, they have,
Yeah,
and they keep expanding, but they aren't
but they don't count.
covered, yeah, and I thought economic. Is that,
I know Ways and Means we did it.
Yeah.
so I remember.
For what it's worth, I'm generally very supportive of this extension just because it's very hard to stand up a TIF from scratch. This community already knows all the inner workings, and I took from their testimony that this will enable more of the growth that we want to occur in the downtown area, the extension. So I think it's just, it makes sense because it's not a whole new TIF, whole new district, and all those questions. that
it
come
makes
with that.
sense, but if we want, as long as they are tying up money that should be going to the ed fund, and this is a 20-year TIF. So they've been doing this for 22, 23 years. That's money that isn't going somewhere else. And if we want to do the project-based TIFs, there's going to have to be some balancing here. I don't know what the city of Barry wants either, so we will hear them all. But I think when you come in for your second extension, you've got to have a better argument than COVID hit us, because everybody got an extension with COVID. There was a blanket 1 year or 2 year extension. And they had gotten a 3-year extension the year before COVID.
And the argument that COVID hit us has become a different argument over time. In the spring of 2020, we were celebrating the end of the pandemic. And it was gonna be back to normal, and people were making this sort of money. And then whatever the Omicron or whatever the variation was, there have been so many. And so we said, oh, okay, it's not over yet.
Right.
And then we were celebrating again, okay, it's over.
We're going to listen.
All right, so
That's all I can say. I also remember that Hartford got the beautiful aqua center, water center, and couldn't afford to pay the taxes on it, they said. Their endower endowed the taxes.
you know what?
The person that endowed, they got another endowment to pay the taxes after we said no. Because that was another one we were getting caught up in, was recreational facilities. And if the town owned them or the town didn't own them, and you've got a lot of private organizations, because the towns don't wanna, there used to be federal grants to build these and run these things, and there aren't. Okay, so we will get or not get out the extensions. So that's a must. And is Barry on here yet? Yep. Okay. So those, we know they're like, they need a decision, yes or no. Elected pass-through entity, that's out. So that one's gone. Local option taxes. You can, this one has been kicked around the block so many times. But I think there's now with remote retail sales, I think there is a bigger argument that everybody can benefit. And if the committee would like, I will put that on next week, and we can possible vote. Okay.
You can tell our constituents you're getting a lot done.
Okay. Okay, yeah, individual, small group insurance markets, that's the housekeeping bill, right? We just got it today. It's 45 pages long, but they've come in before just to tell us what was in it. They have been very good about housekeeping. But I know there was some back and forth between the drafter and the department. So they're both going to be here Friday, and we'll walk through that. Jamie Fian.
Wait, which bill? Because I thought we voted that out.
No.
Oh, I'm looking at individual and
Yes.
small group insurance.
Individual, small group insurance markets. I think that's housekeeping, right?
We voted.
No. Oh, then that one's gone. That's the, okay, then that one is gone. Yes, that was the extension. All right, we got two out of here. Local option taxes we'll put on for next week. And we we should ask what health insurance and Medicaid coverage, fertility-related services. Even the people that are gonna come talk to us know that this is such an expensive thing right now that it's not gonna happen. Normally, health and welfare would hear people who've been impacted. I have one person and one lobbyist who's asked to talk. She's gonna talk, but I think as much as we'd like it.
I think the only thing I wanted to hear lingering was how other states handle this.
Okay,
That was my only, I mean,
okay.
I
so
don't have
let's-
any illusions that this is like a priority to move when it's so expensive, but it was unclear how other states are handling all the
Okay, so we'll
details.
put that down and ask Ledge Council if they can do that. The epinephrine, the EpiPens, it's not gonna cost the state much. If we take that off, there will have to be an adjustment somewhere to keep that 80-20 or 90-10 ratio. So we're gonna take off the copay, and actually that, let me check, the testimony from the insurers was, this one didn't really bother them, but there were some other ones coming down the road that would, because we went through this with chiropractors. If you put no copay for chiropractors, you were gonna have to up the copay for heart surgeons, and where did you want people to pay the most? But if we put too many, and I think one of them may have been the fertility related services, if there's a no copay in there, but I will check.
And I think when EpiPens came up, I just mentioned the prescription drug advisory. That
Well,
like,
that's a separate board.
oh, EpiPens are not prescriptions.
Yes, they're prescription, but this and they used to be $15 and they went up to $200 or $300.
Right.
And the guy that bought the patent was very clear that he did it because he could. And, no, this is, they're covered, but the copay has gone way up so it depends on your insurance. If you have a high deductible on any of these, if you get an EpiPen every month because you're highly allergic, then you're gonna go through your deductible. If you only get one a year, you could be paying a very high cost. But that one I will check. Okay. Sales and use tax on candy. I am holding candy, soda, and anything else I have hostage until I get a bill for the tickets, and there are several of them out there. I might tax your grandmother before we're out of here. The potential bills that some of those bills are coming with are pretty high. So those, they're gonna sit there. Deduction for student loan payments, can we ask joint fiscal for a fiscal note on that one? I've told, they're working on it. I thought we'd ask. That's what I've told advocates. It is a wonderful idea, but when the bills come in about $250 million for childcare, I'm not sure we can afford to give up revenue, but we'll look at it. And, if bad comes to worse, and we'll put them on, see if they've got one next week. We can try and get that out. Surcharge on non-primary dwellings.
I think we agreed when we get a larger bill about changing the.
Yes, there is a bill in the House. They're looking at it. The Ed Fund, I'm sure you've all gotten the emails from retired teachers about the COLA.
Yes.
And an agreement they signed off on in 2016, never thinking that cost of living would go up. And Jane Kitchell and there's somebody in the House, Mike McCarthy, I think, are working on how do we do this? There's thought that we could make a one-time payment for this year to the teachers, but then you need to put the money in the pension fund to pre-fund the, because these are retired people, they aren't paying into the fund. So you can't, so there's some thought about if we can find some one-time money, we could make a payment into the fund where we would be pre-funding the next time the COLA goes above, by, I think it's about 5%. Okay, so that's in the works. I don't think we need to do anything on that. But project-based tax increment financing. Okay, that's the mini tips. Believe there's one coming. Is there one being worked on in the House?
A bill coming from the House?
Yeah,
I haven't heard that yet.
all right.
Would it come from Ways and Means?
So that one,
I thought we had Karen, somebody on the agenda. Well, we talked
we're
about it.
talking about it.
Yeah, so.
Okay, advanced wood heat boilers, that one will probably get out. Tax increment, City of Barry will probably get out. Banking and insurance, oh, that's the housekeeping bill, S95. That's the one we've been through. Jamie Feehan, who, I don't know, it is a bank, it's a federal bank that does loans just to, anyway, he has an amendment that this federal bank, that there's something that's being changed in the housekeeping bill. I've told them I'll sponsor it just to get it out here, but from what I've been told, they don't really oppose it at DFR, they just don't want to put it in on their own. So we're gonna hear from everybody on Friday. And hope, I would like to vote that banking and insurance bill out just because it is generally just housekeeping. I didn't see anything that raised flags. There was a lot of conformance with NAIC. I know they've kept out, I still don't know where the captive insurance bill is, but
Were they gonna send us like a crypto fintech?
they are working on cryptocurrency. They're not putting it in here
Okay.
because it is not housekeeping.
Right.
So at some point, we will see a cryptocurrency. If it's this year and it comes too late for crossover, we can either get an exemption from the powers that be, or we can let it, work on it and let it ride till next year, but that is coming. So far, that's it. The surcharge of non-primary dwellings, yeah, that we can do in the House. I know they're working on one. I know they're at least breaking out the non-homestead. They're getting more granular in, I think, non-homestead and commercial, than they've gone further. The last I heard, they were not increasing a tax or making any tax adjustments this year. But if that bill's coming, I think we should look at that ratio we set up originally between homestead and non-homestead, which has, as predicted, gotten out of sync, whereas now the non-homestead it was sometimes, now it's more than sometimes, but at least find out in how many towns your non-homestead is lower than your homestead.
And would that also be where we look at a house site cap?
We can look at that, as long as we've got a bill that's dividing it out, we can look at caps. I'm getting lots of emails on don't do this. People that have bought a house and this is their income, they're retired, they're renting out the house next door, short term, and I've asked all of them as they come to me to please tell me why you're choosing to do short-term rather than long-term rental. I can see if it's a room in my back basement where I might not want to do it long-term, but if I actually own a house in which I could get rent on a regular basis and not have to go over and clean and change the linens and do all the stuff you have to do for short-term, why are you choosing short-term? Because I think it's important that we
There's more
know
money.
that.
Yeah, more money.
There's more money in short term.
Is that why they're doing
That's
it?
one of the reasons. The second reason is you don't have to worry about Vermont's eviction laws.
And I think that's what we need to take a look at.
Acquire to a lot of landlords, if they live in the situation, it's a crapshoot. If I get a bad tenant and I want to get rid of it, it'll take me several months to do it. It'll cost me a lot of money.
Well, the guy at our hearing talked about $12,000.
I mean, I hear landlords tell me that more than once. It discourages people from becoming landlords, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And that's one of the pushes towards the short-term rental market,
Right.
to avoid this.
And I think we need, I think we need
Yeah.
to take a look at that.
I would, yeah, I mean, just to preview, we can do whatever we want in here. Landlord tenant issues were gonna be more of a centerpiece of the houses.
Okay.
Bill, I'm not saying to address those issues in a way
Right.
we might think is
But that might get
helpful, but
tied
yeah,
up with short-term rentals and how.
we might be looking at it after crossover again.
Yeah,
Housing.
1 year, all we did was landlord.
Yeah, I know,
One
it's
year
like,
we
it's
did-
coming.
One year we did landlord tenant.
I don't think we wanna do it all day in our two
But
committees.
there, I mean,
Some of it's a tax issue, but most of it is just
yeah.
less of a headache.
Yeah, I mean, you do this to make money,
Mhm.
and when it ends up costing you money, a lot of money.
The certainty's gone,
Yeah,
your income.
yeah, so,
It'd be interesting to know who's in short-term rentals. Are those visitors or are those people who are staying?
Well, that's so actually,
you're
more,
getting that.
yeah, well, and the VHFA is about to, because of Senator Brock's good question, they're going to buy the platinum version of AirDNA, which is a data collection system that will now tell us by zip code and region and town how the length of stay.
Yeah.
So we used to know if it was longer than a month. Now we'll know very precisely the average length of stay, or whatever we want to know, from 1 to 365 days for the short-term rental market.
Do we know how many units of housing are, if those are people really just visiting as opposed to people living here, for whom we have a greater interest?
I
in
call it the
seeing houses?
medium-term rental market. There's people who rent from 1 to 9 months to transition to buying a house, which they're struggling to do a short-term project here, to be a pharmacy student. Those will know more about short, medium, and long-term renters, and many are using Airbnb for a year of rental. So it's just, we can't say you're on this system, so you're a short-term renter.
We really don't have any information now.
We know how many
We've some.
units there are being
No, we had the short-term rental alliance in, and they told us that 90% of short-term rentals are rented out by the primary owner of the home. So we have the lowest rate of investment property short-term rentals. I can't tell you offhand how many units, but
It just.
3%, actually 3% of the housing stock is short-term rentals.
And what's the total housing stock? What's the big numbers? 200,000.
It's gonna be a good question for the floor. I mean, right now, we're trying to get grand list information on number of units, which we don't have. So someone might be able to guesstimate for us the number of actual housing units in the state. but
Yeah,
it's
because
not.
that's what we're talking about today. We know where there are designated growth areas.
Yeah.
But we don't know how many vacant lots
Right.
there are in those areas. But we're pretty sure,
Right.
was it 41 miles or 50?
41 square miles of the state is in a designated
We're
area.
pretty sure we can't get 40,000 more units of housing.
Right. And I think what Ellen brought up to us today, because we had a grand list section, we want to know how many units, is right now we differentiate homestead, non-homestead. but we don't ask for the number of units in a parcel. And that's like a legal issue that we didn't want to touch because it would come to this committee.
Well, it may be something that we put
touch.
on
Yeah,
the bill between
exactly,
breaking out
exactly.
the commercial and.
Yeah, we said, let's move it to our committee in a different bill, but that conversation about knowing how many units of housing we have.
Well, it's sort of an interesting development question, like what, yes, we're not in charge of who comes. We do want people to come.
Yeah.
And we also want people to live here and have a place to live. And
We need better data.
It is the thing that.
what are we incentivizing for, and then infill just seems very attractive to me.
Right.
Just like solar, when they say, oh, well, where would you like to put solar? The cheapest place is on Farmers Field because it's easy. It's just green space, but it's. Anything happens with housing, it's just green space.
When we take up the differentiation, the differentiation between property types, Maura could do a more in-depth look, which would serve both of our committees well, our other morning committees, of how much information they can collect right now. And now that they're getting the platinum, if they've started to analyze what we mean by rental.
Yeah, did you have conversations about going up? Like why we have so many places where it's 2 stories, when you could add a third or
We have a-
even a fourth.
We have a floor density bonus
Oh.
in the bill, and we had A&R in to make sure we understand when we talk about density, where are we creating more impervious surface, and things like that, but the designated areas, it's a great place to grow up.
Yeah. It's like I wonder in Bristol, why we don't just like the little, some places have like a 3 and 4 story multi-unit dwelling instead of Main Street is 3 stories mostly, but they're so old fashioned and cute that they're not that tall.
Right,
People start building new things.
But then you get into
They
the
want
car.
Yeah.
and you don't want the jack-o'-lantern
People-
tubes or
yeah.
whatever, like
Yeah.
in your downtown,
Okay.
whatever they call that.
I think Jacqueline,
Yeah.
no, it's, what is it? Streetscape,
Mhm,
yeah, no,
yeah.
streetscape continuity or something,
Right,
yeah.
cohesion.
Yeah. I'm not a designer.
Skyline,
Okay,
uniformity.
we are about done for today. Hang on. I think that's it. We are out. We can open the door. We can go off live.